welcome to Season 3 of Sustainapod, a youth-led podcast for the youth and anyone passionate with a range of sustainability topics. My name is Chinny, and I'll be co-hosting this episode with my co-hosts Belinda. Today, we'll be talking about how to tackle the wastefulness of our current food systems. 1/3 of food produced for human consumption is lost or wasted globally, which amounts to about 1.3 billion tons per year. So what can be done? Joining us today is our special guest, Zuzanna Zielińska, who is speaking with us from Denmark. Zuzanna is a nutritionist and founder of Connecting Grounds, a startup working to upcycle coffee waste into nutritious foods. Zuzanna, thank you for joining us. We're so excited to speak with you.
Thank you for having me.
So let's get straight into it. Can you start by telling us the story of how you got into the idea of starting to upcycle coffee waste?
Yes, so I really like telling this story because it is very organic. I was a barista at a coffee shop aside my studies, just as a student job. And I really got myself into the system thinking, right? Like I thought, okay, I'm working with the end product, but the story of coffee is so rich and it travels so many kilometers to end up in our morning cup. And there's so many people involved in the supply chain. And I really wanted to discover the hidden story. So I was supposed to set off to Guatemala on a coffee plantation for my internship, but then Corona happened, so I couldn't go. But I really didn't want to stay at home, sit and be sad about what I could not do. So I thought, okay, I always wanted to get myself into urban farming or closer to nature, understanding more the food production. So I started to be volunteer in care farm. Care farm it can be urban or peri-urban or rural farms, which help to facilitate therapeutic goals for people. So it can be both mental challenges, physical challenges, burnouts. So the care farm that I volunteer at was focused on people with mental challenges. And I just loved it. I was going there every day. And they had a small compost stand. And I thought, wow, compost is so cool, because in Denmark, currently, we don't really have the organic waste collection. And at that time, I also started to educate myself about the importance of soil, and soil as the microbiome that provides us 99% of our food, and all of the issues that we are facing with depletion of organic matter and desertification. And I thought, wow, that's so crazy that we are not all doing new soil, because you are losing soil, right? And then I connected thoughts that coffee waste is a really good nitrogen-rich material. And if you want to do a really good compost, you need to have a good proportion between carbon materials and nitrogen materials. So I just thought, okay, let me just grab the coffee waste after my shift in work and just bike to my community garden. I was a bit like a Santa Claus, with a huge bag of coffee waste. And I just started to add it to the compost, and it kind of grew that I built another compost with my friends in the care farm. And then I started to go to another urban farms around my city to educate them how they should focus on composting, and how they should start connecting with local resources available. The wood chips, also great material from a wood shop, or coffee grounds, or their own scrap. And it kind of grew from there. And then at some point I realized that, like, wow, the problem is so big. I went to every coffee shop in my city and I was like, hey, what do you do with your coffee grounds? And out of 30 people, there was only one lady that said, oh, okay, I put it to my garden. And it kind of took off from there. I started to thought, okay, there's a system problem. So we cannot solve it with activism or volunteering. We need to find a system solution. And of course, we live in a capitalistic society, so a lot of the solutions will come either from the state or from the private sector, and I don't really have influence so much on the state, even though I was trying to set up like a really good composting facility, but it's just way too expensive compared to what you could sell it for. And then after some research, the idea came, okay, maybe you can eat it. And as you know, I'm a nutritionist, so I'm definitely all about, if you can eat it, you should eat it, because there's quite a lot of movement within upcycling coffee grounds, but a lot of it's devoted to materials or bioplastic, and we will have first and foremost the food scarcity in next 30 to 40 years. And especially also with the climate change, a lot of farmers in Latin America, in next 20 to 30 years, their land will be unusable, because to produce coffee, you need to have a very specific humidity and soil and the right light exposure and the conditions are changing. So we really need to rethink, where is our coffee coming from? Do we pay for it? How much do we pay for it, and how much we consume? And then moving forward, like I just made a post on Aarhus Internationals, that's the place where I live, like, oh, I'm doing this project, does somebody want to join? And I had 4 people saying, yes, we would love to join. And we just had the first call and we said, okay, let's start working together. And that was 2 years ago.
That's just really amazing. Do you think you can explain the importance of purpose-driven food products in today's society?
Yes, I think it's crazy that we even like have to talk about like, why do we need purpose-driven foods, right? And of course, like it's a very valid question, but I think we need to start from the fact that we created a system that really doesn't pay attention to the most important elements, which is the soil, usability of water, how much do we pollute while we produce the food, and of course the justice for people who produce our food. I really like this. A friend of mine told me once that, you know, if you go to a lawyer, maybe you go once and you pay like 5,000 euros for a few hours with him or her, but you use the service of a farmer every single day and we pay them nothing. Like the Green Revolution after the Second World War really transitioned our global food system from locally produced farming operations that focused on feeding the local community to this highly industrialized extract approach in which we just use ton of chemicals that pollute our nature. We pay a huge amount of money for those chemicals. Like, I mean, farmers are locked in the status quo. And then we end up with food that is very, not only unsustainable, but also very unhealthy. I mean, most of the products that you see in the supermarkets are based on cheap oil, heavy processed wheat, sugar, and salt. I mean, we think that we have a huge variety, right? Like we go to supermarkets and we have so many products, like it's endless. But if you start looking at the ingredients, I mean, most of the products are the same ingredients, just with different package and in a different shape. So in my head, and of course I cannot talk on behalf of all of the amazing purpose-driven entrepreneurs that luckily is really growing, but in my head, we just need to take the responsibility of where our food system is going, and we need to really start paying attention to the elements that are really important, which is not the marketing, not the coolest shape, the biggest innovation, but really go back to the roots and understand first and foremost what our physiological needs require for us to be healthy citizens, and also what our climate and what our environment is requiring from us to regenerate. And I think, for example, like what I love that most of the food that is good for us is also good for the environment. So take an example of beans. I mean, beans are nitrogen fixer in the soil. They're amazing element to add in the intercropping. And at the same time, they are so nutritious and they're so delicious, and they're exactly what our body should be consuming. So I think purpose-driven entrepreneurship in the food sector is really going to the root needs of human system and the environmental ecosystem.
I agree, and I resonate so much with what you're saying about how we are currently in a system that has made us so detached from where food is coming from, and it's leading to all these, interlinked health issues, environmental issues, social issues. And I think also one thing that's really interesting with what you're doing is rebranding the idea of what waste actually is, because I think the current system also very much labels like, okay, this is waste, this is what's suitable for consumption, this is what isn't. And as you were saying, like a big part of the shift that we need right now is to really change the way we think about what is edible and what can still be used within the food system. So a little bit more about your current startup. What were the key challenges in scaling the startup in the landscape that you were in? I know you mentioned you grabbed some friends and some more and more people got interested. So what were the big roadblocks that you had to encounter to overcome?
A good question. I think because this purpose-driven entrepreneurship, it's so personal, because for most of the people, like I never planned to have a company, right? So I think for us, a big shift, because we only have one person that has some kind of business background, is to change the perspective from we are doing because we care, but we need to also make it sustainable economically. And I need to make a disclaimer that we are not on the market yet. This will most likely come this year or next year. So I think the biggest challenge was to put away all of the science talk of like why we had to do it, give all of the numbers that we need to feed 9 billion people, etc., and really move into this market-oriented thinking, which is not the easiest, but of course I understand, like everybody has a super busy life, and it's like if we would be constantly bombarded with the negative claims and what's happening in the environment, like we'll be so overwhelmed. So now we're going into like switching our perspective from you have to do it because that's the only way for us to be sustainable, to be like, okay, people want this to be fun and light and enjoyable. So let's do it this way, because hopefully that will enable us to do what we want to do, which is the impact. And of course, there's a lot of much more practical things like establishing supply chain, and which we are still figuring out, and establishing all of the rules and regulations, because on EU market, if the food was not consumed before 1997, it's called novel food. And in order to bring the novel food to the market, you need to pay 2 to 3 million euros for the application, which of course we don't have. But we were very lucky because around last year, they changed the status of coffee grounds. So now it's not a novel food for us anymore, or for anybody. So of course, there's a lot of external forces that we have to deal with, that we don't have so much impact. And sometimes it's pure luck. But I need to admit that we're very lucky to be in Denmark, because there is a lot of focus on helping entrepreneurs. So we have lots of great business advisors, financial advisors. So we really hope that, we will keep it up with understanding how market works and how business works.
I love that like you talked about the coffee being no longer a novel food. And I think there's so many factors that affect the way business works. So can you talk more about your company's hierarchy and why you chose it, and about your approach to make it more diverse and non-hierarchical?
Yes, thank you so much for this question. Of course, we work with upcycling and circular economy, and I think that's really amazing that we have those models. But I really believe if we want to regenerate, we need to unify our efforts. So it's not like we can say, okay, we'll use circular economy, but we'll still have an old model of running the company. And I believe in direct democracy where everybody is equal. I really don't believe that anybody can ever put themselves above another human being. And I think it would be so hypocritical if we would not put those values to our work. So we work in this non-hierarchical cooperative way where everybody has the same right, everybody has the same power to influence things. And of course, we always try to prioritize also good internal communication and prioritize that everybody can at least try to be working with topic that is interesting for them. And of course, I need to make a disclaimer. There's topics like taxes that nobody is really interested with. And most of us are immigrants, so we are not from Denmark. And we only have 2 colleagues that actually speak Danish. So that was kind of like, without their will, they had to take up this task, which I think most of us still feel a little bit bad, but there is this kind of language barriers. But non-hierarchical, completely inclusive, completely transparent. We're willing to share all the information because we believe that we cannot out-compete ourselves on sustainability. We also talk very openly of who we are. Most of us are still students. We don't really know what we are doing. I mean, we are learning, but we really want to show that, like, if we can do it, this random bunch of 5 people that just have pure passion, everybody can do it. And of course, there's limitations. In some countries, it's much more difficult to go with this project. I'm super aware of that. But yes, we are queer and we are very open about it. We are dyslexic and we are open about it. Some of us are activists and we're also open about it, because I mean, entrepreneurship, it's so easy to take over your whole life and to create this identity that the only thing you're like a business owner, right? But I'm also like a young feminist woman, immigrant, queer, and I have passions and I have hobbies and I have opinions about other things. So we really try to make it like as humane as possible, because we believe that future of business is just humans trying to do something good for other humans or for nature, and not these crazy entities with corporations without a human face and structures that are like uncomprehendable.
that raw, open, honest to just, yeah, share about everyone's identities and everyone's actions, and even just admitting like we don't really know what we're doing. I think that's very universally relatable in many ways for young people today. And I agree so much with the idea of wearing many, many hats, because even though entrepreneurship is so tough, finding that balance and self-care in this journey is something that's so important. So going to future goals, what do you think is success for the startup in the coming year?
Yes. So now we're really pushing the research and prototyping on our end products. And we have some quite exciting ideas, which we really want to test with people. So I think that our biggest success is to create something that people actually resonate, that they like to eat it, they like the concept behind it. We find the right people that we can facilitate this product for. And because there is still kind of this like internal battle of like, wow, are we doing it? Are we doing it? And once we actually have a product and I can give it to you, it's like, okay, we are actually doing it, you know? So I think we're super looking forward for connecting grounds to be on the market and for people to be able to taste what we are working on. So we just want lots of people to eat connecting grounds, cookies and power bowls.
I really resonate with the part where it's really important to have people taste food, because I feel like just describing it wouldn't really be as impactful. So speaking of the company and the backstory, what advice would you have given your younger self who was about to start the startup?
I think my younger self would have to have any idea what I'm getting myself into. Because I mean, like from what I was one day making a compost, the next day I was opening company. I think that went quite quick. But I think when I think about it, for sure, I mean, the cliche things, right? Relax, everything will come, trust the process, etc. But I think because again, there was never idea of opening a company, so wasn't really stressing about opening company. But from like the business perspective, like I wish maybe it would focus a bit faster on the needs of the potential consumers and a bit less of trying to validate chemically what we are doing. Because I think for a decent 1 year, we're like, yes, we're doing it because this climate crisis and this food crisis and this political change. So we were still having very much the university focus, you know, writing a report. But in real life, if you want to bring a change within entrepreneurship, you need to talk to people that you want to potentially sell something to. And so I wish I would spend a bit less time on reading Ellen MacArthur and Foundation reports and a bit more time in my kitchen, just talking to my friends, giving them my products, because probably would bring us a bit closer.
I agree so much. As a university student, I definitely feel like there is a tendency to lean into the academia. But really, there's two great takeaways from what you've said, which is that it's really important to just sometimes go for it and test it out. And also that purpose and passion isn't enough. Like it's really the money, you need to look at the legislation and all these other components that is what makes entrepreneurship so complex in a way, because it's not as straightforward as like you want to do something and it can just happen. It's a lot of hard work. So I wanted to shift the topic a little bit to talk about kind of more mental health and kind of working in the food system space, because it is a huge issue. And as you said, it's a systems thing. It's so complicated. And I think for all of us that are passionate about working in this space, it's quite easy to kind of get bogged down by all these different issues that are happening everywhere in the world, regionally, internationally. So for you personally, how do you try to gain this motivation and hope to work in the space with all this kind of heavy issues that you mentioned earlier on in this conversation as well?
I think that really already shows the shift in generations that we have maybe between us and our grandparents and parents. We are so passionate about doing what we are doing, and we are driven by an impact we want to bring, but we still recognize that there are limits, and we recognize that without taking care of ourselves, we cannot take care of anybody else, nor the environment. So as I said, I'm like nutritionist, and so I study health and nutrition. And of course, like I do feel a sense of obligation for myself, because I also work with people on trying to help shifting their lifestyle to a bit more health enhancing behaviors. I live by principles of lifestyle medicine, which is 6 different elements of our life that you should be thinking of covering. And what I love about health and nutrition, that there's no one standard fits all. Like we know we need to, for example, eat whole food, plant-based diet. But for Southeast Asian versus European versus somebody from Colombia, it will be completely different. So there's no one prescribed diet. It's the right type of movement. So every day I have to move my body at least 1 to 2 hours. You should be doing a movement that you really enjoy, because then you have additional benefits, right? So we had right food, right movement, then we have the right relationships. I think it's super important that you have friends outside of work, you have passions, maybe you're activist, maybe you have some kind of hobby. Like I think making sure that you block the time in your calendars for things that you enjoy, no matter how busy you are, is the only way to stay sane. We are also young people. We should be enjoying things that are not only work. Then it's the stress management. So of course, meditation, self-reflection, going to nature, and then right sleep. Like I'm very strong on going to bed at the same time and waking up the same time, weekend or not weekend. So in a sense, maybe I'm a bit more advantaged than other entrepreneurs, because I have this education and knowledge and framework in my head that's really put me on track. So like, yes, I can go crazy, but please, you need to stop.
I definitely agree with that about the 6 pillars and the components. And I really appreciate what you said about moving your body no matter how busy you are, because it's honestly so much better for us if we do that. And more people need to hear that. So thank you for saying that. As a wrap-up question, do you have any advice you would give to young people who are interested in tackling the issues in the current food system?
Yes, so many advices. And first and foremost, I have this one thing that I would really like to ask a lot of young people is, did you ever have at least one class about trusting yourself? And maybe you can tell me the answer. Like you studied what, 10 years, 12 years, then 5 years in university. Did you ever for once had a class where somebody sit down with you and say, okay, this is the methods that you can use to trust yourself? No, I see.
Never. No. It's a really interesting question.
Never, nor did I. So I think the first thing is that we really need to connect to our source. I mean, I'm into spirituality, but also science-based spirituality. Like everybody has their own thing, but connecting to the elements that we are enough and that we know enough, we can do enough. I think that's the first and foremost, the most important thing. Sit down with your passions. Like, okay, I sit down, what do I really believe in? And, my belief is soil. Maybe your belief is accessibility to education for all. And then just find the right people. Things that you can do if you're in a community where the community that shares the same values and passions with you, it's insane. It's one of the most beautiful elements. So find the right people, find your passion, trust yourself, and then just start acting. And what we need to work on is this mindset change of people around us. And I'm pretty sure that everybody can work on it. Everybody. So just please trust yourself. Trust yourself that you are more than enough to make a positive change.
There's no better way to end this conversation. And honestly, like it's never been a better time right now to be a young person and interested in entrepreneurship and doing our part to help transform the world. So thank you so much, Zuzannah, for sharing all your insights and being so honest and passionate and open to sharing everything with us today. And thank you to Sustainapod listeners for tuning in this week with us. We would love to hear from you about this episode. So let us know any questions and comments by messaging us on Instagram at sustainapod_GIH or email us at sustainapod@gmail.com. See you next time.